The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're tearing down the Greek pantheon in our pursuit of all the hidden secrets, Easter eggs, and behind-the-scenes details we didn't know about the game that launched one of our favorite series, 2005's God of War.
Ares! Destroy my enemies, and my life is yours!
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Inspiring clones.
10 years, Athena! I have faithfully served the gods for 10 years. When will you relieve me of these nightmares?
Just like any successful game, God of War spawned no shortage of clones attempting to capitalize on Kratos' newfound success. Whether it was the graphic violence, the combat, or a combination of all the mechanics that made God of War special, other devs were quick to jump on Kratos' coattails and try to launch their own series using Kratos as their starting point. While there were some titles that took the formula and copy-pasted it, such as Dante's Inferno and Heavenly Sword, which closely copied the God of War formula, but were still entertaining, others took their inspirations from Kratos and combined it with others in interesting ways. The Darksiders series is heavily influenced by both God of War and the Legend of Zelda series, and differentiated itself enough to not draw direct comparisons. Even Wolverine took its brutal and fast-paced combat directly from God of War, and was all the better for it.
I bet you thought you were lucky.
Not the first boy.
How much is enough, Kratos? When will it end?
When the glory of Sparta is known throughout the world.
The glory of Sparta. You did this for yourself.
Like any main character, Kratos went through several changes to his design as development got underway. While there were many interesting variations, some of which we'll touch upon further down the list, there was one in particular that stood out. One of the original concept designs showed a blindfolded Kratos wielding a katana and carrying a baby on his back. This concept was likely created before the Greek pantheon was decided on, but it does raise some interesting questions about how combat would have worked with an infant in tow. This concept could have also influenced the 2018 God of War, in which Kratos is accompanied by his young, but far more capable than an infant son, Atreus.
Only fire! Only fire. When I tell you to fire.
Surrender, Kratos.
Your journey begins here. Pray it leads you back to Athens.
God of War 2005 has more than its fair share of Easter eggs, but one of them feels like a message from the gods of Olympus themselves. If players make their way to the Temple of the Oracle, there are specific areas they can interact with to trigger this message. Head to the area by the save point with a bunch of flies buzzing around it and push R2. Then, make your way to the mound of dirt by the gravedigger's hole and press R2. Finally, move to the bridge with the two pillars and press R2 again while standing between them. If done correctly, a message will appear written in the night sky that simply reads, "Surrender, Kratos." Now, knowing the fate of Olympus and all of Greece, it should have said, "Have mercy, Kratos," instead.
Aphrodite.
Kratos, the gods are pleased with your progress.
Sacrificial censorship.
Oh, thank the gods you've come. Break these bars. Get me out of here. What are you waiting for? Let me out. We can find our way back to Athens.
The gods demand sacrifice.
God of War 2005 is a notoriously violent game, especially in the days of the PS2, and Kratos did some pretty questionable things to a lot of people during his pursuit of revenge. However, despite much of this getting past the censors here in the US, other regions were much stricter about Kratos' actions. Along with some of the gorier elements, including dismemberment, the sacrifice of the Spartan soldier in Pandora's temple raised quite a lot of eyebrows for its brutality, as the soldier screamed for his life as Kratos pushed his cage into the sacrificial fire. This act was so barbaric that Germany forced Santa Monica to change the event before the game could be released in the region, body swapping the Spartan for an undead soldier. The sex minigame was fine though. Big screen Kratos. Naturally, as with any unexpected success in video games, it wasn't long before Hollywood came knocking. A film based on the original God of War was quickly moved into production from Universal Studios, with David Self writing the script, and in 2008, Brett Ratner was attached to direct. However, after the project failed to begin production, Ratner left, and in 2012, a new writing team was brought on to rework the script. However, this version would also end up stalling, and while the God of War game franchise continued, Kratos' days in Hollywood appeared to be stuck in limbo, as even the planned Amazon series based on 2018's God of War has run into multiple delays and production challenges.
I thought you'd be bigger. You're definitely the one.
Gravedigger.
Good, my boy, good. Athena has chosen wisely. I knew it was so.
Who are you?
The Gravedigger is one of the most mysterious allies Kratos has in the original God of War, somehow able to dig straight into Hades and help Kratos escape at the exact moment he needed it, and somehow knowing exactly where to dig in the first place. Besides some obvious clues to his true identity as one of the gods, along with his otherworldly advice and demeanor, fans wouldn't get confirmation of their theories until 5 years later in the sequel, God of War: Ghost of Sparta, on the PSP. By completing the game, players unlock the combat arena, and after acquiring all the items in the Temple of Zeus, can unlock the Gravedigger as a playable character. After selecting him, the Gravedigger will transform into Zeus, complete with the Blade of Olympus and the Gauntlet of Zeus.
But how did you know I was...
Athena isn't the only god keeping watch on you, Spartan.
Interconnected.
Emerged from the desert sands. On his back, Pandora's temple awaited, massive and patient, ready to challenge all who went in search of its guarded treasure.
God of War was an ambitious title for the time, pushing the PS2 to its limits before the sequel would strain the aging hardware even further. A big part of this came from the team's desire to create a seamless world, in which every area felt interconnected, minimizing the use of loading screens to create a more immersive experience. Because of this design, God of War had an almost Metroidvania style of exploration, allowing players to revisit areas after unlocking new abilities or finding artifacts to unlock previously inaccessible rooms. This design concept would later carry over throughout the entire franchise, creating some of the most cinematic and immersive games in PlayStation's catalog.
And yet, year after year, I open the gate for more and more soldiers and place more and more bodies on these pyres. If I were you, I'd leave now.
A tiny annoyance.
I will send you back to the depths of Hades!
God of War had quite a few elements planned in the early stages of development that didn't make it into the final game. Originally, game director David Jaffe wanted Kratos to have a fairy-like companion accompany him in the early parts of the game, but then for Kratos to become annoyed by the tiny creature and kill it before the end of the first level, in a clear nod to Navi from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Navi is widely regarded by even the most die-hard Zelda fans as one of the most annoying companions in the series, until Fi later stole that title in Skyward Sword, but it would seem the devs couldn't make this companion annoying enough for players to rejoice in its demise, so the idea was scrapped.
Thank you! Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you.
No!
Up close and personal.
Every bit as weak as the day you begged me to save your life.
I am not the same man you found that day. The monster you've created has returned to kill you.
God of War took a lot of elements from other titles, but one game almost completely changed the perspective of the franchise. Early on in development, game director David Jaffe was inspired by the Dreamcast game Mach-N X, a first-person hack-and-slash developed by Persona masterminds Atlas. However, this perspective was counterintuitive to the cinematic style of gameplay and narrative Jaffe and the team were aiming to create. Some of these elements of first-person combat would make a return in God of War 3, however, and considering the nauseating nature of these moments, it's safe to say Jaffe made the right call sticking to third person. Decided at random.
And if I am able to do this, to kill a god, then the visions, they will end?
These days, the name God of War is synonymous with the franchise, but according to creator David Jaffe, the title wasn't decided on until late in the game's development, and even then, it was chosen at random. In 2019, God of War 2 and 2018 game director Cory Barlog joked the original title was Angry Man from Ancient Greece, and David Jaffe responded with the 3 real titles the team was choosing between, those being God of War, Dark Odyssey, and At the Hands of the Gods. Because the team couldn't agree, all 3 names were placed in a hat and the title was chosen at random. Even Jaffe himself said thank Zeus God of War came up. Can you imagine a franchise spanning 20 years titled At the Hands of the Gods? Neither can we.
But now there is an empty throne in Olympus, and a new god of war is needed.
Cover art chaos. Oftentimes, the cover art of a video game is just as important as the gameplay itself. It is the prospective player's first impression of a game, after all. God of War not only had its share of potential candidates for cover art, but some regions got entirely different artwork. While North America got the cover art of Kratos staring at presumably Mount Olympus with his blades already drenched in blood, PAL regions got the cooler but also a bit more generic version of Kratos fighting hordes of enemies using a decapitated Gorgon head. PAL regions did, however, get the substantially cooler disc design. Whereas America's was just the cover art again, PAL regions got Kratos facing down the Hydra. Absolutely epic. We were robbed. Canonical third.
Complete this final task, and the past that consumes you will be forgiven. Have faith, Kratos.
While 2005's God of War is technically the first God of War game and the title that launched the franchise spanning 2 decades, canonically, it isn't the first game in the series. It actually falls closer to the middle of Kratos' Greek timeline. After the success of 2005's God of War, Kratos' backstory was fleshed out with the PSP entry God of War Chains of Olympus and 2013's God of War Ascension, both of which detailed the events of Kratos' journey before his path of destruction through Greece to confront the God of War Ares. Thankfully, for those who stuck to only the mainline 3 titles, you could still get the complete story, and the rest just further fleshed out Kratos' character and his backstory.
He saw the makings of a god in a mere mortal. Ares would save Kratos. He would turn him into the perfect warrior.
Shedding armor.
The youngest and boldest captain in the Spartan army, Kratos inspired fierce loyalty in his men.
These days, Kratos' shred abs are just as famous as his blades. But early on in development, we could have seen a much more modest Kratos raging across the Greek pantheon. Originally, Kratos' planned to don the full suit of armor he's seen wearing in the CGI cutscenes during the flashbacks. However, at the time, the devs couldn't get the armor to react realistically during battles and would continuously cause the Spartan to glitch when in combat. So the choice was made to ditch the armor and let Kratos show off his chiseled physique. Honestly, it feels like some of the ferocity of his takedowns would have been lost had he been shielded by a huge set of armor, so they made the right choice. History lesson.
But now, as a man, Kratos returned to Sparta, determined to find his mother and discover the truth.
Originally, Kratos' backstory was going to be much more fleshed out in the original God of War. Through unlockable videos, the devs revealed the plans were originally for Kratos to search for his mother before the events of the game and discover that his brother still lived. While this would have given Kratos a deeper backstory, it also took away from the impact of the events that led him to become the Ghost of Sparta after mistakenly murdering his family. However, these story elements were later used in the PSP title God of War Ghost of Sparta.
Finally left her small village, she swore a new life in Sparta. Kratos would never know the truth, never know who his father really was.
Speedrunning. 2005's God of War isn't a beefy game by any means, certainly not like its sequels, but a standard playthrough will still take you roughly 7 to 8 hours. However, if you're playing the remastered version of the game and somehow manage to keep your playtime under 5 hours, you'll earn the trophy The Speed of Jason McDonald. Jason McDonald was the combat designer of the original God of War and held the office record for the fastest playthrough of the game. Once the collection was remastered for PS3, Bluepoint included a nod to this achievement with a trophy dedicated to his historic runtime. 1-800-KRATOS. Just because Kratos ascends the throne at the end of God of War doesn't mean the secrets end when the credits roll. If players manage to destroy the two massive and seemingly indestructible statues in the throne room, which can require hundreds of hits, a code will pop up on the screen for players to decode. These codes lead players to a phone number, and if players call the number, they'll hear a conversation between Kratos and God of War creator David Jaffe, which eventually ends with Kratos becoming angry at Jaffe and killing him.
Oh my, that's it! Ah! Oh, shit! What are we doing? What are you doing? Come on, we gotta make the sequel!
Another odd phone message players can unlock if they beat the game on God mode is Kratos discovering a prison chamber with Ares' soul trapped inside, tormented for all eternity for his actions.
The soul of Ares itself, the soul of war, the soul of hate. See how it rides in pain.
Neither of these have had any significance on the series going forward, but are fun Easter eggs nonetheless. Classic inspirations.
This entire village stands as an affront to Lord Ares! Burn this village! Burn it to the ground!
While God of War inspired numerous copycat games after its release, the series took its own inspirations from several other titles. Game director David Jaffe was directly inspired by Capcom's Onimusha title and its approach to combat combined with Resident Evil-style puzzle solving. Games such as the Castlevania series and Devil May Cry heavily influenced the game's combat, platforming, and exploration, while Eco was the main inspiration behind the camera movements and the more nuanced integration of puzzles compared to the often obtuse nature of the RE series. This approach to combining elements and mechanics would become a series staple and influence countless other games to experiment with a combination of game mechanics.
And with that curse, all would know him for the beast he had become. His skin white with the ash of his dead family. The ghost of Sparta had been born.
Adults only. No one could accuse God of War of holding back on its more risque elements, especially when it comes to the graphic amounts of blood, gore, and even nudity, but would you believe that what we ended up with was the tamer version of the original concept? Despite already receiving a mature rating for all the elements already listed, God of War nearly ended up with an adults-only rating by the ESRB for its overabundance of graphic violence and sexual content. The devs had to make numerous adjustments to the game just to secure the mature rating, but would continue to push the boundaries with each subsequent entry. Gladiatorial.
His desire for conquest knew no bounds, but that which he desired would ultimately consume him.
Kratos went through several concept designs before his iconic look was finalized. Originally, plans were made to have Kratos encased in a set of gladiator armor, along with a helmet that made his face barely visible, and even some depicting him with long dreadlock-style hair and exaggerated proportions. Kratos also nearly had a blue tattoo instead of his now classic red. However, designers felt this was too close to the barbarian class from Diablo, so his look was changed last minute. The final version of Kratos players eventually got was drawn on a napkin, blades and all, including some concepts of Kratos' brutal fighting style.
Only a simple pledge of loyalty was required.
My life is yours, Ares. From this day, I shall carry forth your will.
Before the blades.
The blades of chaos, forged in the foulest depths of Hades. Once attached, the chains remained so, chained and seared to the flesh, a part of the bearer's body.
Just as important as perfecting Kratos' now iconic look was deciding on his arsenal. Long before the Blades of Chaos, Kratos was expected to have weaponry more traditional to a Spartan soldier. Along with the originally planned set of armor, Kratos was going to battle with a plain sword and shield combo. However, this wasn't fun and felt too similar to other games with similar combat mechanics, and so eventually Kratos was bound to the now infamous Blades of Chaos, which not only offered combat options for both long and short range, but also looked a hell of a lot cooler.
In return, ultimate power.
Character Graveyard. Kratos wasn't the only one to undergo significant changes to his character as development continued. Numerous elements were scrapped or altered, with some enemies not even appearing in the final game. However, the devs still included a way for fans to see these rejected enemies and concepts. By simply beating the game, players can unlock the character graveyard and get up-close looks at multiple enemies that didn't make it into the final game, as well as specific concepts for existing enemies that were altered during development, with notes from the team as to why they were rejected. Fans can even get a look at some early in-game models of Kratos himself. Conflicted development. Development on God of War was just as tumultuous as Kratos' journey in the game. Game director David Jaffe was intensely passionate about the game and would often butt heads with the rest of the development team over his obsessive pursuit of perfection. Specific elements such as Kratos ripping off the Gorgon's head were especially confrontational, with Jaffe demanding more blood and chaotic elements to be integrated into the takedown. Jaffe has gone on record stating that he believes much of the anger and frustration he felt during the game's development went into Kratos' character and his brutality. Living single.
I still have allies in Olympus, Ares. Now, you will see how strong I am.
It's difficult to imagine Kratos without actor Terrence Carson bringing the character to life. Until 2018, Terrence's performance as Kratos was synonymous with the character, and while Terrence has had a prominent career in both video games and cartoons thanks to his voice, he actually got his start on TV. Specifically, Terrence starred in a 90s sitcom with Queen Latifah called Living Single. Given Kratos' rage-fueled nature brought to life by Terrence's performance, it's hard to imagine the voice of Kratos cracking jokes in front of a studio audience in a comedy sitcom.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
Kratos with a C.
You will not die this day, Kratos. The gods cannot allow one who has performed such service to perish by his own hand.
Although God of War notoriously takes quite a few creative liberties with their implementation of Greek mythology, Kratos really did exist in the Greek pantheon. Kinda. Kratos with a C is the god of strength, might, power, and sovereign rule in Greek mythology. Given Kratos' supernatural strength throughout the game, it's clear where his inspirations came from. While there aren't many stories about Kratos compared to the other gods, he is known for convincing Hephaestus to chain Prometheus to a rock as punishment for stealing the god's fire. Mythological Kratos is also a full god, unlike his video game counterpart, who is only a demigod.
Take these stairs, Kratos. They lead to your ultimate reward.
Retcon.
And from that point forward, throughout the rest of time, whenever men rode forth to battle for good cause or for evil, they did so under the watchful eye of the man who had defeated a god.
Santa Monica Studio had no idea at the time of release just how well God of War would perform, so they created Kratos' story as a self-contained adventure with sequel potential. However, some of the elements of the original game's ending and unlockable content contradict the rest of the series. At the end of the game, Kratos is positioned as the god of war who watches over all conflicts for millennia, including all the major wars in humanity's history. Another crucial element is an unlockable cutscene in which modern humans find the skeletal remains of Kronos in the desert, still carrying Pandora's temple on his back. So how did Santa Monica account for these moments in the rest of the series? Short answer, they ignored it. Rather than rewrite these narrative threads into Kratos' continued quest for revenge, it was easier to simply retcon these moments out of the God of War canon.
The mortal who had become the new god of war.
What was your favorite piece of unknown knowledge about the original 2005 God of War? Share your picks in the comments. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.